The streets are unaware of the whole extent of it, but we do know that Jim was deeply affected by Chrissy's darkest secret, which was recently made public in court. The whole business was shaking when Jim yelled at Cameron, "Bro," with the cameras rolling and the microphones leave. In front of a shouting throng, Jim Jones abruptly lost his temper and lunged at Cameron, almost spilling blood outside the courthouse. Assert that Cam was aware of it all along, while others believe that Chrissy orchestrated the situation and that some people are hesitant to talk at all. However, a leaked document, a missing witness, and years have passed. For what reason was Cameron there? When the judge shouted, "Exposed," why did Chrissy give him the death gaze, and why isn't anyone speaking up? Outside the Manhattan courthouse, it started with side eyes and stiff shoulders, but nobody expected Jim Jones to lose it like this. The air was thick with lies, secrets, and the kind of treachery that could rock a person to their very core, and the tension was palpable. We're digging up everything because once you hear the truth, you won't look at them the same way. Now, something important is being buried. It all revolved around Chrissy Lynn, a mysterious character who had been hiding away. As the judge's gavel struck, the case came to an end. Her name, which in the hip-hop world had once been synonymous with love and loyalty, now carried a weight of scandal and whispers. But it was no longer about rumors. The evidence was damning, and the courtroom had just become a stage for a showdown for which no one was prepared. The audience went silent at the start of the hearing, and Jim was the center of attention. He was attempting to make sense of the situation, and it became evident that Chrissy had been concealing something important as the judge went over the document. Jim's hands were clenched, his knuckles white, but no one could have foreseen what would happen next. He stood up, his voice full of genuine anger, and he said, "She's lying. This is all a setup." Cameron, who had been sitting a few feet away, stood up for a minute, his face expressionless. But the tension between him and Jim was so great that it could have sliced through the courtroom as everyone waited to see what would happen next. With an angry tone, Jim said, "You knew about this. You knew what she was up to. And you never told me, did you?" As the two men's eyes met, memories of their history and their commitment to one another racing through their thoughts, the tension grew. Jim, who was full of resentment and betrayal, wouldn't have it. Cameron, who was calm and collected, said, "Let's take it outside," in a voice as cold as ice. As the audience looked on in astonishment, he replied, "You think I'm going to walk away after everything we've been through?" The mood shifted as they left the courtroom. The electric tension between the two men seemed to overpower the usual bustle of the courthouse grounds, which felt like a distant hum. Jim stormed off, leaving a trail of speculation and gossip behind, clearly determined not to be let go easily. Cameron followed him grudgingly but determinedly. That had just transpired. What on earth is happening? He inhaled deeply, his face unreadable, and yelled, "She's been lying to me the whole time, and you didn't say anything." "Jim, I was unaware that your Jim whirled around, his eyes wide with anger. "Don't give me that. You knew something was off. How long were you going to let her play me for a fool?" Cameron tried to hold his ground, but I didn't know the whole story. "You have to believe me, man." His voice was steady, but there was a tension in his eyes that whatever was going on with Chrissy was much deeper than either of them. "I've got your back." What the hell are we going to do now? The evidence was there, and no matter how hard he tried to deny it, the truth could not be avoided. Jim's eyes softened for a minute, realizing that someone he had trusted, like family, could betray him in this way. As Cameron got closer, Jim's anger slowly gave way to a sobering understanding as he inquired. His voice trailed off as he spoke, saying, "We need to sort this out together. We've got to get to the bottom of this." But before he could finish, a loud voice behind them exclaimed, "Hey, are you two going to stand here and bicker, or are we going to do something about this?" Jim and Cameron turned to see a group of reporters with their cameras focused on them after the speaker demanded their attention. Jim was not in the mood for interviews, especially with the world watching. But the damage was done, and his countenance darkened as the questions came flooding in. "You are. Come on. Why don't you two tell us what happened in the courtroom?" Jim shouted at the reporters. One reporter yelled, and another said, "Is the gap due to Chrissy's betrayal?" "The world is watching. We need to stay ahead of this," Jim said, nodding slowly as Camron pulled him aside from the crowd of reporters gathered around them. "You have no idea what's really going on here," he said in a frustrated voice. But the more he yelled, the more the cameras flashed, documenting every moment of this drama for the world to see. He knew Camron was right. But there was something deeper that Jim couldn't shake. The betrayal wasn't just about Chrissy anymore. It was about everything. His lies, the secrets, the friendships that were now hanging by a thread. Jim wasn't ready to back down. "We'll handle it our way, but we're doing it on our terms." The two men stood there locked in their own private battle, with the world watching their every move. However, Jim Jones was far from ready to let it go. And as the cameras flashed around them, it became clear that this was only the beginning of the storm. The aftermath of what happened outside the courtroom was nothing short of chaotic, and the media storm was in full swing, with every outlet from the biggest gossip sites to the local tabloids consuming the drama. "I don't trust anyone anymore," Jim muttered as he stared at his phone, still by his side, the screen relentlessly lighting up with an endless stream of notifications. His mind racing, bouncing from one thought to another. Chrissy's betrayal had cut deep, but it wasn't just about her. The more Jim thought about it, the more he realized that there were things he hadn't known that he should have seen coming, man. "You're right to feel that way, but don't let the anger blind you, man," Side remarked, after taking a long take from his cigar and turning to face Jim. "You need to give this some serious thought." Jim's face stiffened as he looked up at Camron. "This isn't just about her lying to you," Camron stated steadily. "There's more at play here, Jim, trust me." Jim didn't immediately respond. Instead, he just gazed straight ahead. Jim had always trusted Camron because they had been through so much together. But now that the pieces were beginning to fit together, he couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was lurking beneath the surface, something he wasn't seeing. The two men walked in silence for a few minutes, until they reached a quiet corner of the courthouse parking lot. Jim pulled out his phone and eye-contacted a number and inquired of the person on the other end. "What's up with Chrissy?" He spoke in a quiet, frantic voice, but then someone else added, "You don't really know, do you? What the devil are you talking about?" Jim's pulse skipped a beat. "You've only seen the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more underneath. She's been playing some serious games behind your back," the voice said, seeming almost delighted. "I wouldn't be so sure, Jim. You're going to find out the hard way," the person on the phone said with a cold laugh. The call ended before Jim could respond, and he remained staring at his phone for a while, the words replaying in his mind. "I swear, if she's been playing me, what do you mean? Don't give me that crap. What's really going on?" Jim replied, his eyes burning with anger. "I never wanted to hurt you, Jim, but there are things that I couldn't tell you that go way beyond just me, threatening me, and they have dirt on me that may ruin everything," Chrissy said in a shaky voice. "Jim, I've been forced into a corner. Choice but to follow it." Jim looked at her disbelieving face and remarked, "Who has been threatening you?" Jim's heart raced when the door behind them slammed before she could respond, leaving the room completely black. What the hell is going on? Jim thought as a figure appeared out of the shadows, someone he had never expected to see here. Jim was trying to process the situation, but his mind was unable to keep up with it, and his fists clenched involuntarily, and his eyes were fixed on the person who had been pulling strings behind the scenes. Jim's heart was racing as he stood, frozen, staring at the figure who had just stepped into the shadows. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, turning to face Chrissy, who seemed as surprised as he was. Jim felt his blood chill as the figure moved closer. "Camron," Jim muttered incredulously. Jim fiercely demanded his voice, but the figure took a while to answer. Jim could barely see their silhouette as they moved into the dimmer light. The man he had always relied on, the one who had stood by him when no one else would, the man who was supposed to be his brother. "Jim, you don't know the full story, but you will. It's time you learned the truth and stopped being blind to the bigger picture." Cameron's response was dark and almost scary. Jim shook his head, his mind racing. "What on earth are you discussing? I didn't mean to offend you, but you don't comprehend some of the things Cameron has done. You've been playing me from the start, Chrissy. I'm shocked that you did this, but what kind of setup is this? Cameron too?" For a minute, Cameron's face softened, almost as though he felt sympathy. "What's it about? Given that you've been with me the whole time." But then it was gone, replaced by the hard look that had always been there when business was involved. "I never wanted to hurt you." Cameron's voice grew colder with each word, as if the weight of his confession was finally being lifted off his shoulders. "It's not a setup, Jim. It's the truth. I've been working behind the scenes for longer than you know all this time, feeding information to the people who've been pulling the strings." Jim staggered back, the shock of it all causing his head to swim. The one person he believed he could trust, his old friend, had been working behind the scenes with those who were attempting to destroy him, betraying him all along. Jim said, "You've been working with them," in a voice that was hardly audible anymore since reality had set in. There were more important issues at hand, and Chrissy was just the beginning. She wasn't the true target. "Yes," answered Cameron somberly, "but not for the reasons you believe you've been the target for a long time, Jim. I was the inside man, providing them information and keeping an eye on your every move, giving them the opportunity to make their move, but no longer, since you were the key to bringing everything down. Not anymore? What do you mean?" Cameron's eyes met Jim's with a chilly resolve that said, "I'm done with them, but I'm done with you." "You think you can just leave me after everything you've done?" Cameron shouted, running high. Cameron's face was impassive as he motioned for Jim to follow his directions, but before Jim could respond, he heard a car engine revving outside. "You've been blinded by loyalty for far too long." "Let's go," Cameron said, turning his back and walking toward the door. Jim stood there, for a moment, trying to understand what had happened. His mind was racing, jumping from one shocking idea to the next. What was the bigger picture, and why had Cameron changed his behavior? Follow him. The sudden change in tone, the coldness, and the detachment rocked Jim to his core. Jim was so oblivious that he followed Cameron outside, unable to shake this feeling that he was walking straight into a trap. "We're getting out of here," Cameron said firmly, "and you better be ready, Jim. This isn't just about you anymore." The sound of a car door slamming shut reverberated through the parking lot as soon as he stepped out into the cold air, and a black SUV with tinted windows stood in front of them. One thing was clear. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than ever. Jim's stomach growled as he approached the car, uncertain of what to expect and uncertain of whom to trust. "It's bigger than you. It's bigger than all of us." The door of the SUV slammed shut behind the two men as they entered the rear. Unbeknownst to Jim, the driver started. As they drove through the pitch-black streets, the automobile began to move, quietly. There was a lot of tension in the room, and Jim continued to watch Cameron, trying to read his expression for any clue that this was all a twisted joke. But when the car stopped, there was nothing to see. Instead, the driver pulled into an abandoned structure, its windows boarded up and covered with dirt. Jim was apprehensive, heightened the situation and the direction they were taking him. Jim followed the two guys who led the way out as the door opened, seemingly anticipating their arrival. He didn't know where they were headed, and his mind was racing, but the feeling of dread was almost too much to handle. When Jim stepped inside, he was greeted by a dimly lit room with a large table in the center and several persons seated around it. Jim's heart pounded as shadows obscured faces. He questioned, "What the hell is going on?" Jim's eyes widened when He recognized me, and he replied, "Don't tell me you're involved," hardly believing what he was hearing. "What is this?" one of the figures asked, rising. The man smirked coldly and added, "Oh, I'm more than involved. Jim, this is only the beginning. You're going to discover the shocking truth that no one saw coming is that Jim Jones was drawn into a world of deceit, corruption, and betrayal that goes deeper than we could ever imagine. He was betrayed by the one person he trusted the most, and the room fell silent as he realized he was much deeper into something than he had ever imagined. It was not just about Chrissy or Cameron, it was about something much bigger, and there was no turning back now. We have only touched the surface, so don't worry about what's coming next, but remember that justice always finds a way, right? What do you think? Will Jim Jones be able to fight his way out of this, or has he already lost the battle? In the comments below, I've never thought of this, but the question is, who is really responsible for all of this? What is their ultimate goal? Where does this dark journey go from here? I would love to hear your thoughts about the truth being revealed in this way, so please leave a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any more shocking revelations. This is just